I should have known something was wrong the moment I saw Patricia Hendricks standing in my driveway at 7 in the morning, clutching her ridiculous binder with the HOA logo, stamped on the front like it was the Constitution itself. My name is William Keller, and I had lived in the Meadowbrook Estates subdivision in Columbus, Ohio, for exactly 8 months, which apparently was long enough to end up on Patricia's radar for every possible infraction she could dream up. The November chill bit through my flannel shirt as I stepped outside with my coffee, watching her tap her foot impatiently on my concrete driveway. She was probably in her mid-50s, with that particular haircut that screamed she wanted to speak to the manager of literally everything. Blonde highlights perfectly maintained despite the early hour. Her navy blazer looked freshly pressed even though the sun had barely risen. "Can I help you, Patricia?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. I had learned quickly that any emotion with this woman was ammunition. "William." She said my name like it was an accusation. "I need to discuss several violations that have come to my attention regarding your property." I took a long sip of my coffee, counting to 5 in my head. What violations would those be? She flipped open her binder with practiced efficiency. "Your lawn was exactly 2.7 inches tall last Thursday. The HOA covenant clearly states that grass must be maintained between 1 and 2.5 inches. Additionally, your garbage bins were visible from the street for approximately 4 hours past the designated retrieval time last Tuesday. Patricia, it rained for 3 days straight. I was waiting for the ground to dry before mowing, and I was at work. I got home as soon as I could to bring the bins in. The rules don't include weather exemptions," she said, her voice taking on that particularly grating tone that suggested she was enjoying this. "And employment is not listed as an acceptable excuse for covenant violations. I'll need you to acknowledge receipt of these citations." I set my coffee down on the porch railing. "Is there anything else?" "Actually, yes." She turned a page, running her manicured nail down a list. "I noticed you have a delivery scheduled for today. Firewood, according to the permit application you filed." "That's right. Winter's coming and I use my fireplace. I filed the temporary storage permit 3 weeks ago, just like the rules say." Patricia's lips pressed into a thin line. "The permit was approved for delivery and storage in your backyard only. The wood must not be visible from any street or neighboring property. I'll be monitoring to ensure compliance. It's going straight to the back. The delivery company knows to stack it along my rear fence. We'll see." She closed her binder with a snap. "I'll be watching, William. This neighborhood has standards and I intend to maintain them." She turned on her heel and marched back to her white Lexus SUV parked across the street, the vehicle that seemed to constantly patrol our neighborhood like she was running some kind of suburban surveillance operation. I watched her drive away, then picked up my coffee and headed back inside. My golden retriever, Murphy, wagged his tail sympathetically as I walked past. "She's something else, buddy," I muttered, scratching behind his ears. The firewood delivery was scheduled for between 10 and noon, according to the confirmation email from Timber Ridge Firewood Supply. I had ordered 2 cords of seasoned oak, which would be enough to get me through the Ohio winter with plenty of cozy fires. The house I had bought was a modest 3-bedroom ranch with a beautiful stone fireplace that had been one of the selling points. After years of apartment living in Cleveland, I had been excited to finally have a real fireplace again. I spent the morning working from home, responding to emails for my job as an IT consultant. Around 9:30, I decided to check my security camera system. I had installed cameras shortly after moving in, primarily because my schedule often kept me away from home, and I wanted to keep an eye on packages and deliveries. The The system included 4 cameras covering the front door, driveway, backyard, and side gate entrance. Everything recorded to a cloud service with a 30-day backup. At 10:15, my phone buzzed with a notification. The driveway camera had detected motion. I pulled up the live feed and saw the Timber Ridge truck pulling up, a large flatbed loaded with neatly stacked firewood. Perfect timing. I saved my work and headed outside. The driver was a guy in his 30s named Jose, according to his name tag. "William Keller?" he asked, checking his clipboard. "That's me. Got 2 cords of seasoned oak for you. Where do you want it?" I led him around the side of the house through the gate. My backyard was fenced with a 6-foot privacy fence, and I pointed to the area along the back fence line where I wanted the wood stacked. "Right there would be perfect," Jose nodded. "No problem. This is going to take maybe 45 minutes. We stack it neat, make sure it's stable." "Sounds good. I'll be inside if you need anything." I left the side gate open for them and went back into the house. Through the window, I could see Jose and his assistant starting to unload the wood, using a dolly to transport it from the truck. They were professional and efficient, and I was glad I had gone with a company that had good reviews. About 20 minutes later, I got another notification from my security system. The front camera had detected motion. I pulled it up, expecting to see a mail carrier or maybe a neighbor walking their dog. Instead, Patricia's white Lexus was parked in front of my house again. I watched as she got out, walked up my driveway, and instead of coming to my front door, she headed directly toward the side gate. Something about the way she moved set off alarm bells in my head. I pulled up the side gate camera feed on my phone and watched as Patricia entered my property without permission. She looked around quickly, then walked toward where Jose and his assistant were working. I couldn't hear what was being said through the camera, but I could see Patricia talking to Jose, gesturing animatedly. Jose looked confused, shaking his head. Patricia pulled out her phone, showing him something on the screen. Then she pointed toward the front of the house, then to her SUV. My stomach dropped. What was she doing? I watched as Jose scratched his head, looking uncertain. His assistant had stopped working, watching the exchange. Patricia was insistent, pointing again toward her vehicle, talking rapidly. Then I saw Jose slowly nod and my heart started pounding. I grabbed my keys and rushed outside through the front door, just in time to see Jose and his assistant starting to load some of my firewood into the back of Patricia's Lexus. The rear hatch was open, and they already had several pieces stacked inside. "Hey!" I shouted, jogging down the driveway. "What's going on?" Everyone froze. Patricia turned to me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "William, I was just explaining to these gentlemen that there's been a change to the delivery location." "A change? What are you talking about?" Jose looked between us, clearly uncomfortable. "Sir, this lady said she's with the homeowners association. She showed me some kind of official document saying that firewood deliveries need to be inspected and temporarily stored at the HOA facility before being delivered to individual properties. She said it's a new rule that just went into effect." "That's absolutely not true." I turned to Patricia. "What document did you show him?" Patricia held up her phone, angling it away from me. "The updated HOA covenant regarding bulk deliveries. It was passed last month at the board meeting." I was at that board meeting. No such rule was passed. In fact, the minutes from that meeting are public record and I can pull them up right now. Her smile faltered slightly. "Perhaps you misunderstood the scope of the amendment. Jose, that's my firewood that I paid for." I pulled out my phone, showing him the receipt and delivery confirmation. "This is my address, my order, my property. Whatever document she showed you is fake." Jose raised his hands. "Look, man, I don't want to get in the middle of some neighborhood dispute. I just deliver wood." She said she was official and showed me something that looked legitimate. She's not official, and she has no authority to redirect my delivery. I looked at Patricia directly. "You need to have them put my wood back in my yard right now." Patricia's expression hardened. "I'm trying to help you avoid a violation, William. The wood needs to be inspected for invasive species and proper seasoning before it can be stored on HOA property. This is for everyone's protection." That's complete nonsense. Ohio doesn't require HOA inspection of firewood. You're making this up. I turned to Jose. "Please put the wood back in my backyard where it was supposed to go." Jose looked at his assistant, then back at me and Patricia. "I really don't want to be part of this." "Lady, can you show me that document again?" Patricia hesitated for just a moment too long. "I don't have to prove anything to you. I'm the HOA president and my authority is established." "Then I'm calling the police," I said, pulling out my phone, "because you're currently stealing my property." "Don't be dramatic, William. I'm not stealing anything. I'm enforcing community standards." "You just loaded my firewood into your personal vehicle without my permission. That's theft." I had already dialed 911. The operator answered, and I explained the situation as calmly as I could. "Yes, I'm at 1247 Oakmont Drive in Meadowbrook Estates. The president of my HOA is currently taking my firewood delivery and loading it into her vehicle without permission. I have security camera footage of the entire incident." Patricia's face flushed red. "You're calling the police over a misunderstanding. This is absurd." "It's not a misunderstanding. You intentionally deceived my delivery driver and attempted to steal my property." I looked at Jose. "I'm sorry you got dragged into this. Can you please unload her vehicle and finish stacking the wood in my backyard?" Jose nodded quickly. "Yeah, absolutely." "Come on, Rick. Let's get this done." They started removing the wood from Patricia's Lexus, but Patricia stepped forward, blocking them. "That wood is now under HOA custody for inspection. If you proceed, you'll be in violation of the community covenant." The operator was still on the line, and I relayed Patricia's statement. The operator confirmed that officers were on their way and advised me to stay on the line. I put the phone on speaker and set it on the hood of Patricia's SUV. "Patricia, step aside and let them do their job," I said. "I will not. This is HOA business and you're overreacting." But I could see a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes now. She hadn't expected me to actually call the police. We stood in an awkward standoff for about 7 minutes, with Jose and Rick waiting by the SUV, Patricia blocking access with her arms crossed, and me standing there with my phone on speaker. Murphy had started barking from inside the house, sensing the tension. Finally, a Columbus police cruiser pulled up to the curb. 2 officers got out, a younger officer who looked to be in his late 20s and an older, more seasoned officer who immediately sized up the situation with the kind of tired expression that said he'd seen it all before. "Who called?" the older officer asked, his name tag reading Martinez. "I did. William Keller, I live here." I pointed to my house. "I had a firewood delivery scheduled this morning. That woman, Patricia Hendricks, came onto my property without permission, told my delivery drivers that she had authority to redirect my delivery, and had them start loading my firewood into her vehicle. When I confronted her, she refused to return my property." Officer Martinez turned to Patricia. "Madam, is this accurate?" Patricia straightened her blazer. "Officer, I'm the president of the Meadowbrook Estates HOA. I was enforcing our community covenants regarding bulk deliveries. This is an internal HOA matter, not a police issue." "Did you take possession of property that belongs to this man?" Martinez asked. I was temporarily securing it for inspection purposes, as outlined in our governing documents. Did he give you permission to take his property? Patricia hesitated. The HOA covenant supersedes individual permission for community standards enforcement. Martinez looked at me. You mentioned security camera footage. Yes, sir. I have cameras covering my property, including the side gate and backyard. Everything is recorded. I can show you the footage right now. I pulled up my security system app on my phone, offering it to the officer. Martinez took my phone and watched the footage, his partner looking over his shoulder. I had queued it up to when Patricia first entered through my side gate. They watched as she approached the delivery drivers, showed them something on her phone, and convinced them to start loading wood into her vehicle. There was no audio, but the sequence of events was clear. That's pretty straightforward, the younger officer said. Martinez handed my phone back. Madam, I'm going to need to see this HOA document you showed the delivery driver. Patricia pulled out her phone, tapping at the screen for several seconds. It's part of our covenant amendments. I have it here somewhere. Take your time, Martinez said, though his tone suggested his patience was limited. After more tapping and scrolling, Patricia said, It seems I don't have the specific amendment pulled up, but it's in our official records at the HOA office. So you showed the driver a document that you now can't produce? Martinez asked. I know I showed him something. Perhaps it was our general authority clause. Jose spoke up. Officer, she showed me what looked like an official form with the HOA logo. It had some legal language about inspections and temporary custody. I thought it was legitimate. You still have whatever she showed you? Martinez asked. No, sir. She just showed it to me on her phone, didn't send it or anything. Martinez turned back to Patricia. Madam, here's the situation as I see it. You entered this man's property without permission, took possession of his property without his consent, and when confronted, you refused to return it. The fact that you claim HOA authority doesn't change that this appears to be theft by deception. This is ridiculous, Patricia said, but her voice had lost some of its confidence. I'm trying to maintain community standards. William has been a problem resident since he moved in, constantly testing the boundaries of our rules. My grass was 3 inches tall once because of rain, I interjected. That's hardly being a problem resident. Martinez held up a hand. Let's focus on what happened today. Madam, are you going to allow the delivery drivers to return Mr. Keller's property and complete his delivery? Fine, Patricia said, her voice tight. But I'm filing a formal complaint with the HOA board about this incident, and there will be consequences for wasting police resources on an internal matter. You do that, Martinez said. In the meantime, step aside. Patricia moved away from her vehicle, and Jose and Rick quickly unloaded the firewood pieces, looking relieved to finally be doing their job. They hurried back through the side gate, and I could hear them working double time to get the delivery finished. Martinez pulled out a notepad. Mr. Keller, I need to get some information from you for the report. Your full name and date of birth. I provided my information, along with Patricia's information when requested. The officers also got statements from Jose and Rick, who confirmed the sequence of events. They took photos of the scene and noted the security camera system. Am I being charged with something? Patricia asked, her arms crossed defensively. That depends, Martinez said. Mr. Keller, do you want to press charges for theft and trespassing? I considered for a moment. Part of me wanted to just be done with the whole situation, but another part of me knew that if I didn't take a stand now, Patricia would continue to make my life miserable with her petty power trips. Yes, I said. I want to press charges. She deliberately deceived my delivery drivers, attempted to steal my property, and trespassed on my land. I have all of it on camera. Patricia's face went pale. You can't be serious. Over firewood, over theft, I corrected. You literally tried to steal my property. The fact that it's firewood doesn't make it less of a crime, Martinez nodded. Madam, I'm going to need you to provide your ID. You're being cited for theft by deception and criminal trespass. This is insane, Patricia protested. I'm the HOA president. I was doing my job. Being HOA president doesn't give you authority to take people's property, the younger officer said. That's not how it works. As Martinez wrote up the citations, I could hear Jose and Rick finishing up in the backyard. A few minutes later, they came around from the side gate, both looking eager to leave. All done, Mr. Keller, Jose said. 2 cords stacked neat and stable along your back fence. Sorry about all the confusion. Not your fault. Thanks for handling it professionally. I had already planned to tip them well, and after this circus, I added an extra 20 to each of their tips. They loaded up their truck and left quickly, probably eager to tell this story back at the supply company. Martinez finished writing the citations and handed them to Patricia, who took them with a shaking hand. You're required to appear in court on the date listed, Martinez explained. Failure to appear will result in a warrant for your arrest. Do you understand? Yes, Patricia said quietly, her earlier bravado completely gone. You have any questions? No, then you're free to go. I'd suggest you avoid Mr. Keller's property in the future unless you have explicit permission to be there. Patricia got into her Lexus without another word and drove away. I noticed several neighbors had come out of their houses during the commotion, watching from their yards and driveways. Word was going to spread through Meadowbrook Estates fast. After the officers left, giving me a case number for my records, I went inside and collapsed on my couch. Murphy jumped up next to me, resting his head on my lap. The whole thing had been surreal. I pulled up my security footage again, downloading copies of everything to my computer and backing it up to an external drive. Something told me I was going to need that footage. The rest of the day was relatively quiet, but my phone kept buzzing with messages from neighbors. Apparently, Patricia had made herself unpopular with more than just me, and people wanted to know what had happened. I kept my responses brief and factual, not wanting to fan any flames. That evening, I checked my email and found a message from the HOA board secretary, a woman named Gloria Winters. The subject line read, "Emergency Board Meeting." The email informed all residents that there would be an emergency HOA board meeting the following evening at 7 p.m. to discuss recent incidents involving board authority and police interaction. I replied confirming my attendance. There was no way I was missing that meeting. The next day at work, I could barely concentrate. My mind kept running through what I would say at the meeting, how I would present the facts, and what Patricia might try to claim. I left the office early and got home with plenty of time to prepare. I loaded the security footage onto my laptop, printed out copies of my delivery confirmation and receipt, and reviewed the HOA covenant sections regarding bulk deliveries. Nowhere in the document was there any mention of required inspections or temporary HOA custody. At 6:45, I walked to the community clubhouse, a small building near the front entrance of Meadowbrook Estates that served as the HOA meeting space. Several cars were already in the parking lot, and more residents were arriving. I recognized most of them from neighborhood events, though I didn't know many by name yet. Inside, chairs were arranged in rows facing a table where the 5 board members sat. Patricia was in the center, looking composed but tense. She wore another perfectly pressed blazer, this time in charcoal gray, and her hair was impeccably styled. The other board members were Gloria Winters, the secretary, a man named Doug Richardson, the treasurer, and two at-large members, Janet Kim and Robert Sullivan. I took a seat in the third row, my laptop bag on the empty chair beside me. The room filled up quickly, and by 7 p.m. there were at least 40 residents present. That was actually a good turnout for our neighborhood of about 150 homes. Patricia called the meeting to order, her voice crisp and professional. "Thank you all for coming on short notice. This emergency meeting has been called to address false accusations made against me in my capacity as HOA president and to discuss the consequences of frivolous police involvement in HOA matters." I raised my hand. "Point of order. That's not an accurate description of yesterday's incident." Patricia's eyes narrowed. "You're out of order, William. I haven't opened the floor for comments." "Actually," Gloria said, flipping through a binder, "according to our bylaws, any resident has the right to correct factual inaccuracies during board statements. That's in Section 4.3. Patricia's jaw tightened. "Fine. William, what correction do you wish to make?" I stood up. "There were no false accusations. I have video evidence of everything that happened yesterday, including you trespassing on my property, deceiving my delivery drivers, and attempting to steal my firewood. I also have the police report and the citations you received. Those are facts, not accusations." A murmur went through the crowd. Apparently, not everyone had heard the full story yet. "The police were called unnecessarily," Patricia said. "I was performing my duties as HOA president." "Your duties don't include stealing people's property," called out a voice from the back. I turned to see an older gentleman I recognized as living 2 streets over from me. "I wasn't stealing anything," Patricia insisted. "I was enforcing a new covenant amendment regarding inspections." I opened my laptop. "I have the minutes from the last 6 board meetings right here. There's no such amendment. Would you like me to read them aloud, or would you prefer to retract that claim?" Patricia's face flushed. "The amendment was discussed." "Discussed isn't the same as passed," Gloria said quietly, looking at her own notes. "William's correct. We discussed the possibility of requiring inspections for bulk landscaping deliveries to prevent invasive species, but we never voted on it. It was tabled for further research." "And it was about landscaping materials, not firewood," Doug added, looking confused. "I remember that discussion. We were concerned about mulch and topsoil potentially containing invasive insects." Patricia opened her mouth, then closed it again. I could see her recalculating her approach. Robert Sullivan, one of the at-large members, cleared his throat. "Patricia, did you or did you not take possession of William's firewood delivery without his permission?" "I was attempting to enforce community standards," Patricia said. "William has been problematic since moving in." "That's not an answer to my question," Robert said firmly. "It's a yes or no question." The room was completely silent now, everyone watching Patricia. "I redirected the delivery for inspection purposes," she finally said. "Without his permission," Robert pressed. "The HOA covenant gives me authority to maintain standards." "Show me where in the covenant it gives you authority to take residents' property," Robert said, holding up his own copy of the document. "I've been on this board for 6 years, and I'm not aware of any such clause." Patricia didn't respond. Janet Kim, the other at-large member, spoke up. "I'd like to see Mr. Keller's security footage if he has it available." "I do," I said, turning my laptop around. "I have the complete sequence of events." I played the footage for the room, starting from when Patricia entered my property through the side gate. You could see her approaching the delivery drivers, showing them her phone, pointing to her vehicle, and gesturing as she clearly gave them instructions. Then the footage showed my firewood being loaded into her Lexus, until I came outside and confronted everyone. When the video ended, The room erupted in conversation. Several people were talking at once, and Patricia was trying to bang a gavel to restore order, but nobody was paying attention. "That's clear as day," someone said. "She straight up lied to those delivery guys," another voice added. "Order," Patricia shouted. "This is still an official board meeting." Gloria stood up, which seemed to quiet people more effectively than Patricia's gavel. "I think we need to address something serious here. Patricia, you trespassed on a resident's property and attempted to take his belongings under false pretenses. That's not just a violation of your duties as president. That's illegal, as evidenced by the police citations." "I was doing what I thought was best for the community," Patricia said, but her voice had lost its authority. "By stealing someone's firewood?" Doug looked genuinely baffled. "How is that good for the community?" "William has been pushing boundaries since he arrived," Patricia said, her voice rising. "The grass violations, the garbage bin situation, and now this firewood delivery without proper notice. I filed a permit 3 weeks ago," I said, pulling out my printed documentation. "I followed every rule." "I have the approved permit right here, signed by Gloria." Gloria nodded. "That's correct. His permit was properly filed and approved. There were no issues with it. And the grass thing was literally one time because of weather," added a woman I recognized as my next-door neighbor, Susan. "I remember because my grass was long too that week. We had 3 straight days of rain. Nobody could mow." Another neighbor chimed in. "Patricia cited me last year because my house numbers weren't perfectly centered on my mailbox post. They were off by half an inch. Who measures that?" This opened floodgates. Multiple residents started sharing their own stories of Patricia's excessive enforcement, petty citations, and unreasonable interpretations of HOA rules. There was the family who got cited because their Halloween decorations were still up on November 1st at 6 a.m. The couple who got a violation notice because their car was parked in their driveway overnight while their garage was being painted. The elderly man who got cited for having a garden hose visible from the street while he was actively using it to water his flowers. The stories went on for 20 minutes, painting a picture of Patricia as someone who had turned HOA leadership into a personal fiefdom where she wielded rules like weapons against residents she deemed insufficiently compliant. Robert Sullivan finally held up his hands. "Okay, I think we've heard enough. Patricia, I'm going to be blunt. This has gone too far. Your behavior yesterday wasn't just overzealous enforcement, it was criminal. You literally got cited by the police." "Because William overreacted," Patricia protested weakly. "No," Robert said firmly. "Because you broke the law. There's a difference between enforcing HOA rules and committing theft. You crossed that line." Janet nodded in agreement. "I move that we hold a vote of no confidence in Patricia Hendricks as HOA president, effective immediately." "I second that motion," Gloria said without hesitation. Patricia's face went white. "You can't do this. I've been president for 4 years. And you've been increasingly problematic for most of that time," Doug said. "We've talked about it before in executive sessions, Patricia. The excessive citations, the hostile interactions with residents, the complaints we've received. Yesterday was just the breaking point. All in favor of removing Patricia Hendricks as HOA president?" Robert asked. Gloria, Doug, Janet, and Robert all raised their hands. Patricia sat frozen, staring at the 4 raised hands. "The motion passes 4-1, Robert said. "Patricia, you're removed as president effective immediately. We'll need you to turn over all HOA documents, keys, and access credentials within 48 hours. "This is a witch hunt," Patricia said, standing up abruptly. "You're all going to regret this. I built this HOA into what it is today. I maintained standards when everyone else wanted to let things slide. You turned it into a dictatorship, someone called from the audience. Patricia grabbed her bag and stormed toward the door, but before she left, she turned and pointed at me. "This is your fault, William. You couldn't just follow simple rules. You had to make everything difficult." "I followed every rule," I said calmly. "What I wouldn't do is let you steal my property. There's a difference." She left without another word, the door slamming behind her. The room erupted in conversation again, but this time the energy was different. People seemed relieved, even energized. Robert took over running the rest of the meeting. They quickly voted to install him as interim president until proper elections could be held. Gloria volunteered to handle communications with residents about the transition. Doug assured everyone that HOA finances were in order and separate from Patricia's authority, so there would be no disruption to normal operations. "We're going to review all active citations and violations," Robert announced. "If anyone believes they've been unfairly cited, or if you have concerns about how violations were handled, please submit them to Gloria. We want to make sure we're being fair and reasonable going forward." The meeting wrapped up around 9 p.m. As people filed out, several neighbors approached me to shake my hand or pat me on the shoulder. Susan, my next-door neighbor, gave me a hug. "Thank you," she said. "Someone needed to stand up to her. She's made this neighborhood miserable." "I just didn't want to lose my firewood," I said with a slight laugh. "Well, your firewood might have saved the whole neighborhood," an older man said, smiling. "I'm George Patterson. I live over on Birch Street. Patricia cited me 6 times last year. 6 times. For things like my trash lid being slightly open and my car being parked too far from the curb in my own driveway." Others shared similar sentiments. It became clear that Patricia had created an environment of fear and frustration, where residents were constantly worried about arbitrary citations and hostile confrontations. The relief in the room was palpable. I drove home feeling both exhausted and oddly energized. Murphy greeted me at the door with his usual enthusiasm, and I took him for a walk around the neighborhood. The November air was crisp, and I could see lights on in houses, families settling in for the evening. It felt more peaceful than it had in months. Over the next few days, things seemed to calm down. Patricia did turn over the HOA materials, though Robert told me she did so with poor grace, showing up at his house unannounced and dumping boxes of files on his porch without a word. The neighborhood Facebook group, which had been relatively quiet before, suddenly became active with people discussing the changes and expressing hopes for a more reasonable HOA approach. I thought that was going to be the end of it. I was wrong. 2 weeks later, on a Monday evening, I was working late in my home office when Murphy started barking frantically at the front door. I checked my security camera feed and felt my stomach drop. Patricia's white Lexus was parked in front of my house again, and she was walking up my driveway carrying what looked like a gas can. My heart started pounding. I immediately called 911, keeping my eyes on the security feed. 911, what's your emergency? This is William Keller at 1247 Oakmont Drive. The former president of my HOA is on my property right now with what appears to be a gas can. She was recently removed from the board and cited for theft. I'm concerned she's going to vandalize my property or worse. Officers are being dispatched now. Stay inside and keep your doors locked. Do not confront her. I watched the feed as Patricia walked around the side of my house toward the back gate. She tried the handle, but I had locked it after the Firewood incident. She stood there for a moment, looking frustrated, then started walking back toward the front. But instead of leaving, she walked over to where I had a small storage shed in my side yard. The shed wasn't visible from the street, tucked behind some landscaping, and it was where I kept my lawn equipment and tools. Patricia tried the shed door, and to my alarm, it opened. I had forgotten to lock it after mowing the day before. Through the camera, I watched Patricia disappear into the shed. A minute later, she emerged with my lawn mower, which she proceeded to drag toward the street. She was stealing my lawn mower. I heard sirens in the distance. Patricia must have heard them too, because she abandoned the lawn mower on my front lawn and ran back to her vehicle. But the police cruiser turned onto my street before she could drive away, lights flashing. This time there were 3 officers, including Officer Martinez from before. I went outside as Patricia was being asked to step out of her vehicle. "Mr. Keller," Martinez said when he saw me, "you called about someone with a gas can." "Yes, sir." My security cameras caught her entering my property with a gas can, attempting to access my backyard, and then going into my unlocked shed. She dragged my lawn mower out onto the front lawn. I have all of it on video. "Madam, did you enter this property tonight?" Martinez asked Patricia. "I was just trying to help," Patricia said, but she looked panicked now. William's lawn equipment was improperly stored. The shed door was open. I was going to move his mower somewhere more secure. "With a gas can?" Martinez asked. "I thought the shed might need fuel containers properly stored." "That doesn't explain why you took his lawn mower." "I was going to store it properly for him." One of the other officers walked over to Patricia's Lexus and looked in the back window. "There's a gas can in the back here." Martinez turned to me. "Can I see your security footage?" "Absolutely." I pulled it up on my phone, showing the officers the sequence of events. Patricia arriving with the gas can, trying my back gate, entering my unlocked shed and dragging my lawn mower out. The officers watched carefully, and I could see their expressions harden. After the footage ended, Martinez looked at Patricia with clear disapproval. "Madam, you were previously cited for theft and trespass involving this resident. You're currently facing court dates for those charges. And now you're back on his property, trespassing again and taking his property again." "What were you thinking? He got me removed from the HOA board," Patricia said, and her voice cracked. 4 years of service thrown away because he couldn't follow simple rules. Someone needs to teach him that actions have consequences. "So this was retaliation?" Martinez asked. Patricia seemed to realize she had said too much. "I want a lawyer." "That's probably a good idea," Martinez said. "Madam, you're under arrest for criminal trespass, theft, and attempted arson." "Arson?" Patricia's voice rose. "I wasn't going to burn anything." "You brought a gas can onto someone's property without permission after being previously cited for similar behavior. Given the circumstances, we have to consider the possibility. At minimum, it shows intent to cause harm." They handcuffed Patricia and placed her in the back of one of the cruisers. Another officer retrieved the gas can from her vehicle, handling it carefully with gloves. Martinez took detailed photos of my lawn mower on the front lawn, the open shed, and Patricia's vehicle position. "Mr. Keller, I'm going to need you to come down to the station to make a formal statement," Martinez said. "I know this is becoming a pattern with her, which actually works in your favor for prosecution. This demonstrates ongoing harassment and criminal behavior." "I'll come down right now," I said. "That works. Follow us down." I secured Murphy inside the house, made sure all my doors were locked, and drove to the Columbus Police Department's precinct station. There, I spent 2 hours giving a detailed statement, providing copies of all my security footage from both incidents, and documenting the timeline of Patricia's behavior since I had moved into the neighborhood. A detective named Sarah Foster was assigned to the case. She was in her 40s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. "Mr. Keller, I've reviewed your previous report and tonight's incident," Detective Foster said. "I'm also going to request that we look into Miss Hendricks's behavior with other HOA residents. Based on what I'm seeing here, there's a pattern of harassment and abuse of authority. Do you know of other residents who might have had similar issues?" "Yes, quite a few actually. At the last HOA meeting, several people shared stories about excessive citations and hostile interactions. I'd like their names and contact information if possible. This might be bigger than just property theft. We're looking at potential stalking, harassment, and now attempted arson charges." I provided the names I remembered from the meeting, including Susan George Patterson and several others. Detective Foster took notes and assured me that she would follow up with all of them. "What happens now?" I asked. "Miss Hendricks will be held overnight pending arraignment." Given that she violated the terms of her previous citations by trespassing again, and given the escalation to bringing a gas can and attempting to take property a second time, I expect the prosecutor will ask for significant bail or possibly remand. She's showing a clear pattern of not respecting court authority. Will I need to testify? Possibly, depending on how she pleads. But with the video evidence you have, this is a pretty strong case. Her own statement about teaching you a lesson doesn't help her position. I left the station around midnight, exhausted and unsettled. The whole situation had escalated beyond anything I could have imagined. All I had wanted was to live peacefully in my house, burn some firewood in my fireplace, and not deal with arbitrary HOA drama. The next morning, I called in sick to work. I didn't trust that Patricia wouldn't make bail and come back, so I spent the morning going around my property and making sure everything was secured. I installed additional locks on my shed and back gate. I also upgraded my security system to include motion-activated floodlights and louder alerts. Around noon, Robert Sullivan called me. "William, I just heard what happened last night. Are you okay?" "Yeah, I'm fine. Shaken up, but fine." "I can't believe she went back to your property." "With a gas can, no less." "What was she thinking?" "She wasn't thinking. She was angry and wanted revenge." "Well, the board met this morning in emergency session. We're going to be sending a formal letter to all residents explaining that Patricia is no longer affiliated with the HOA in any capacity, and that any contact from her should be reported immediately. We're also going to be cooperating fully with the police investigation." "Thanks, Robert." "I appreciate that." "No, thank you. You've been more patient with this situation than anyone should have to be. The fact that it got to this point reflects poorly on all of us. We should have reined her in years ago." Over the next few days, Detective Foster's investigation expanded. She interviewed over a dozen residents who reported various incidents with Patricia, ranging from excessive citations to verbal harassment to showing up at people's homes unannounced to inspect their properties. A pattern emerged of Patricia systematically targeting residents she deemed insufficiently compliant, using the HOA as a weapon to punish people for minor or imagined infractions. 2 residents reported that Patricia had entered their properties without permission to take photos of supposed violations. One family discovered she had been going through their trash to look for evidence of covenant violations. Another resident had security footage of Patricia measuring his grass with a ruler at 6 in the morning. The more Detective Foster uncovered, the more serious the charges became. What had started as a simple theft case was now involving charges of stalking, harassment, criminal trespass across multiple properties, and the attempted arson charge from my property. Patricia's arraignment was set for the following week. I attended, sitting in the gallery with several other Meadowbrook Estates residents. Patricia appeared in an orange jumpsuit, looking haggard. Her lawyer, a tired-looking man in an ill-fitting suit, argued for reduced bail. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Jennifer Walsh, argued against any bail. Your Honor, Ms. Hendricks has demonstrated a clear pattern of escalating criminal behavior, targeting multiple residents of her former HOA. Despite being cited by police and removed from her position of authority, she immediately returned to the victim's property with what appears to be the materials for arson. She's shown complete disregard for court authority and presents a clear danger to her community. Patricia's lawyer protested. Your Honor, my client has no criminal record prior to these incidents. She's a longtime homeowner with ties to the community. The alleged attempted arson is pure speculation. She had a gas can in her vehicle, which is not illegal. She had a gas can on someone else's property without permission, Walsh countered. Combined with her statement to police about teaching him a lesson and her pattern of targeting this specific resident, there's clear intent. The judge, an older man named Howard Chen, reviewed the case file with a frown. I'm inclined to agree with the prosecution. Ms. Hendricks, you were cited just 2 weeks ago for theft and trespass involving this same victim. Instead of staying away while those charges are pending, you returned to his property at night with a gas can. That shows extraordinarily poor judgment at best and criminal intent at worst. Your Honor, I wasn't going to hurt anyone, Patricia said, speaking for the first time. Then what were you going to do with the gas can? Judge Chen asked. Patricia didn't answer. That's what I thought. Bail is denied. Ms. Hendricks will remain in custody pending trial. Given the multiple counts and multiple victims, I'm consolidating all charges into a single trial. Miss Walsh, work with Detective Foster to ensure all victims are prepared to testify. Patricia's face crumpled. Your Honor, please. I have a home, a life. I can't stay in jail. You should have considered that before repeatedly breaking the law, Judge Chen said. Trial date is set for January 15th. We're adjourned. As Patricia was led out of the courtroom, she looked directly at me. The hatred in her eyes was chilling. Whatever vendetta she had started with trying to enforce HOA rules had transformed into something much darker. The trial date was set for mid-January, which gave me 2 months to try to get my life back to normal. The holidays came and went quietly. Meadowbrook Estates held its first reasonable HOA meeting under Robert's leadership, where they voted to revise the covenant enforcement procedures to include clearer guidelines, a formal appeal process, and limits on inspection authority. Several of the more excessive rules were removed entirely, including the strict grass height requirements and restrictions on when garbage bins could be visible. The neighborhood felt different, lighter somehow. People seemed more relaxed, more willing to actually talk to each other rather than worrying about citations. Susan and I became good friends, often walking our dogs together in the evening. George Patterson organized a holiday lights competition that was actually fun rather than stressful, with no threats of violation notices for decorations being too bright or too tall. My firewood was finally put to good use. I burned fires regularly throughout December, enjoying the warmth and ambience. Murphy loved lying in front of the fireplace, and I found myself genuinely appreciating my home for the first time since moving in. The trial arrived on a cold January morning. The courthouse was busy with various cases, and I waited in the hallway with about 10 other residents from Meadowbrook Estates who were testifying. Detective Foster had done thorough work, building a comprehensive case that showed Patricia's pattern of behavior over several years. The trial lasted 3 days. The prosecution methodically presented evidence of Patricia's escalating harassment and criminal behavior. My security footage was shown multiple times, each viewing making Patricia's actions look worse. The video of her deceiving my delivery drivers and attempting to steal my firewood was damning. The footage of her returning at night with a gas can was even worse. Other residents testified about their experiences with Patricia. Susan described how Patricia had cited her 14 times in 1 year for infractions like parking her car 6 inches too far from her curb or having her porch light on past 10 p.m. George Patterson testified about Patricia entering his property without permission to photograph his garden, which he claimed violated landscape standards even though his plants were all approved species. The most disturbing testimony came from a couple named Mark and Jennifer Torres. They had security footage showing Patricia going through their trash at 3 in the morning, apparently looking for evidence of violations. When confronted, Patricia had threatened them with litigation and claimed she had absolute authority to inspect any part of any property in the HOA. Patricia's defense attorney tried to paint her as an overzealous community volunteer who had gotten carried away with her duties. He argued that her intentions were always to maintain community standards, even if her methods were sometimes misguided. He claimed the gas can incident was a misunderstanding, that Patricia had only intended to check my shed for proper fuel storage. The prosecution tore this defense apart. Walsh pointed out that Patricia had no legitimate reason to be on my property at night, no authority to enter my shed, and no explanation for why she would bring her own gas can if she was checking my fuel storage. She highlighted Patricia's statement to police about teaching me a lesson, demonstrating clear retaliatory intent. On the third day, the jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before returning with a verdict. Patricia was found guilty on multiple counts: 2 counts of criminal trespass, 2 counts of theft, 1 count of attempted arson, and multiple counts of stalking and harassment related to the other residents. Judge Chen scheduled sentencing for 2 weeks later. When that day came, the courtroom was packed with Meadowbrook Estates residents. The prosecution recommended a sentence of 5 to 7 years in state prison, arguing that Patricia's pattern of behavior and her position of authority made her crimes particularly serious. Patricia's attorney pleaded for leniency, arguing that his client had no prior criminal record and that her actions, while wrong, didn't warrant significant prison time. He asked for probation and community service. Judge Chen listened to both sides, then asked Patricia if she wanted to make a statement. She stood, looking much smaller than she had in all our confrontations. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "I let my responsibilities consume me. I thought I was helping the neighborhood, maintaining standards. But I understand now that I crossed lines I shouldn't have crossed. I'm sorry to William and to everyone else I hurt with my actions." The apology sounded rehearsed and I wasn't sure she meant it, but at that point it didn't matter. The damage was done. Judge Chen delivered his sentence. "Miss Hendricks, you held a position of trust in your community. Instead of using that position to serve your neighbors, you used it to harass, intimidate, and ultimately commit crimes against them. Your escalation from excessive citations to actual theft to bringing a gas can onto someone's property at night shows a dangerous disregard for both the law and the safety of others. I'm sentencing you to 4 years in state prison on the attempted arson charge, with concurrent sentences on the other charges. You'll also have 3 years of probation following your release, during which you'll be prohibited from holding any position of authority in any homeowners association. You're also ordered to pay restitution to Mr. Keller for his legal expenses and to the HOA for costs associated with your removal and the subsequent investigation." Patricia's shoulders slumped. 4 years was longer than the minimum but shorter than the maximum she could have received. She was led out of the courtroom in handcuffs, and this time she didn't look at me or anyone else. Outside the courthouse, several of my neighbors gathered. There was a strange mix of relief and sadness. Nobody had wanted things to go this far, but Patricia had made choices that left everyone with few options. "I feel bad for her," Susan said, "but also relieved. Does that make sense?" "Yeah, it does," I said. "She needed help probably years ago. Instead, she just kept getting worse." Robert Sullivan shook my hand. "Thank you for standing up to her when the rest of us were too intimidated. You probably prevented something even worse from happening." "I just wanted my firewood," I said with a tired laugh. "I never imagined it would end up here." "Well, your firewood delivery became the catalyst for fixing a lot of problems in our neighborhood," George Patterson said. "That's got to be worth something." Life in Meadowbrook Estates gradually returned to normal, or rather, to a better version of normal. The HOA continued operating under Robert's leadership, and eventually held proper elections, where he was officially voted in as president. The new board focused on reasonable enforcement of genuinely important rules, while relaxing the petty restrictions that had made life miserable. I kept my security cameras running, but mostly they just captured squirrels, delivery drivers, and Murphy chasing leaves in the yard. The footage of Patricia's crimes was backed up in multiple locations, though I hoped I'd never need to look at it again. Sometimes I thought about Patricia sitting in prison, and wondered if she understood what had gone wrong. Had she started out wanting to genuinely help the community and somewhere along the way lost perspective? Had she always been controlling, and the HOA position just gave her an outlet? I didn't know, and I supposed it didn't matter anymore. What mattered was that I could finally enjoy my home without fear of arbitrary citations or hostile confrontations. I could mow my lawn when the weather permitted, bring my garbage bins in when I got home from work, and stack firewood in my backyard without worrying about someone stealing it. On a cold evening in late January, I sat in front of my fireplace with Murphy beside me, watching oak logs burn steadily. The wood crackled and popped, throwing warm light across the room. I thought about everything that had happened since that November morning when Patricia had shown up to cite me for grass that was too tall. All of it, the theft attempt, the emergency HOA meeting, the second trespass with the gas can, the trial, everything had started because I wanted to burn firewood in my fireplace. It seemed absurd when I thought about it that way, but it wasn't really about the firewood. It was about someone who had confused authority with power, who had forgotten that being in charge of an HOA meant serving neighbors, not ruling over them. My phone buzzed with a text from Susan. "Movie night Friday. Your place. I'll bring popcorn." I smiled and replied yes. That was what a neighborhood should be. People looking out for each other, making friends, building community. Not someone with a binder full of citations prowling the streets looking for violations. I added another log to the fire and settled back into my chair. Murphy sighed contentedly. Outside, a light snow had started to fall, covering Meadowbrook Estates in a clean white blanket. The neighborhood looked peaceful, and for the first time since moving in, it actually felt that way too. The firewood delivery that Patricia had tried to steal kept me warm all through that winter and into the spring. Every time I lit a fire, I was reminded of how important it was to stand up for yourself, to not let bullies hide behind rules and authority to justify their behavior. I was reminded that communities are built on respect and cooperation, not fear and intimidation. By the time spring arrived and I no longer needed fires, Meadowbrook Estates had transformed. The new HOA board had implemented all their promised reforms. Residents were friendlier, more engaged. We had neighborhood barbecues and garden tours, and a community yard sale where people actually talked and laughed together. One warm April evening, I was outside planting flowers in my front bed when a moving truck pulled up to the house across the street. A young couple got out, looking excited and nervous the way new homeowners do. I waved and walked over to introduce myself. "Welcome to the neighborhood," I said. "I'm William Keller." "Thanks. I'm David Chen, and this is my wife Lisa," the man said, shaking my hand. "We're excited to finally be homeowners." "It's a great neighborhood," I said honestly. "If you need anything or have questions about the HOA, feel free to ask. We've got a good group of people here." "That's great to hear," Lisa said. "We were a little worried about HOA rules." We looked at some places where the association seemed really strict. "Ours is reasonable," I assured her. "Just be a good neighbor, take care of your property, and you'll be fine. We don't sweat the small stuff anymore." We chatted for a few more minutes, and I gave them Robert Sullivan's contact information for any HOA questions. As I walked back to my house, I felt genuinely good about welcoming them to Meadowbrook Estates. This was what community should feel like. That evening, I got an email from Detective Foster. Patricia had been officially processed into the state prison system and would be eligible for parole after serving 2 years of her 4-year sentence, assuming good behavior. The email thanked me again for my cooperation with the investigation and noted that my security footage had been instrumental in securing the conviction. I archived the email and deleted the shortcuts to my security footage from the trial. That chapter was closed. Patricia would serve her time, and hopefully, she would get whatever help she needed to understand why her behavior had been so destructive. But that wasn't my responsibility anymore. Summer came, and I used my fireplace less, though I did occasionally light small fires on cool evenings. I had used about half of my 2 cords of firewood, which meant I'd need to order more before next winter. When the time came, I'd file my permit with the HOA, schedule the delivery, and hopefully, it would be as boring and uneventful as such things should be. Murphy and I took walks every evening through the neighborhood, and I got to know more of my neighbors. George Patterson taught me about native Ohio plants for my garden. Susan and I started a book club that met monthly. The Torres family invited me to their daughter's birthday party. These were the normal, pleasant interactions that make a neighborhood feel like home. One October evening, almost a year after the Firewood incident, I was sitting on my front porch watching the sunset when Robert Sullivan walked over. "Hey, William, got a minute?" he asked. "Sure, what's up?" He sat down in the chair next to me. "The board's been talking, and we want to ask if you'd be interested in running for an at-large position. Janet Kim is moving to Florida, so we'll have an opening." I considered it. A year ago, I would have said absolutely not. The idea of being involved in HOA leadership after everything with Patricia would have seemed insane. But things were different now. The HOA actually functioned the way it was supposed to, helping maintain property values and community standards without becoming tyrannical about it. "Can I think about it?" I asked. "Of course. Elections aren't until January anyway. Just wanted to plant the seed." After Robert left, I thought about his offer. Being on the HOA board would be a way to ensure that what happened with Patricia never happened again, that the reforms we had put in place stayed in place. It would be a way to actively participate in building the kind of community I wanted to live in. Maybe I would run. Maybe I wouldn't. But the fact that I was even considering it showed how far Meadowbrook Estates had come in a year. We had gone from a neighborhood ruled by fear and petty citations to one where residents actually wanted to be involved in governance, because they trusted it to be fair and reasonable. As the sun set and the autumn chills settled in, I went inside and lit a fire. Murphy curled up in his favorite spot, and I opened a book I had been meaning to read. The wood crackled and burned, filling the room with warmth and light. It was peaceful. It was home. And it had all started because someone tried to steal my firewood delivery, and I had security footage that sent her straight to jail. Sometimes the universe works in unexpected ways, turning a simple theft attempt into a catalyst for positive change. I wasn't glad it had happened exactly, but I was glad about where it had led. The fire burned steadily, just as it should, just as I had planned that day in September when I placed my order with Timber Ridge Firewood Supply. 2 cords of seasoned oak, properly stacked in my backyard, ready to keep me warm through the winter. It had seemed like such a simple thing at the time. I guess nothing is ever really simple when you live in an HOA. But with the right people in charge and the right systems in place, it doesn't have to be complicated either. It can just be what it should be. Neighbors helping neighbors maintain a community they're proud to call home. Outside, the first real cold snap of the season was settling over Columbus. Inside, my fire burned warm and bright, and Murphy snored gently at my feet. Tomorrow I'd go to work, come home, maybe take Murphy for a walk and light another fire. Normal, peaceful, exactly as it should be. That's all I had ever wanted. And finally, after everything, that's exactly what I had.